Hey.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Philip, and together with João, we will lead the session on why reducing food waste is the #1 solution against climate change. We're really excited to be here, and João and we will spend the next 20 minutes or so to speak a little bit why food waste is such a big problem, and then also looking a little bit from our own experiences on what the solutions are and how we can go about it and trying to increase impact at scale. And then also looking a little bit into the challenges and opportunity when it comes to food waste. So hope you enjoy it. And let's get cracking. So I'm Philip. I'm tuning in from Copenhagen today. I hope the weather is better in Lisbon than it is here, because here the world is going down. But really happy to be here. I'm the Global Impact Manager here at Too Good To Go. Too Good To Go is a social impact company that is building a movement against food waste. And we are doing so in many different ways, working very closely with local and regional governments, with schools, trying to impact businesses across the supply chain, but also trying to change behaviors in consumers and consciousness and awareness on how they basically perceive food waste. But most importantly, we are also providing a clear solution through a free app that people can download across 17 different countries across Europe and North America, that basically allows them to buy surplus food from businesses such as cafes, restaurants, hotels, supermarkets at a reduced price at the end of the day. And this way, we make sure that all food produced is also food consumed, and really a clear solution to fighting food waste. João, do you maybe want to give an intro of who you are and what you do, and then we get started?
Sure. Thank you, Philippe, for the introduction. So I'm João. I'm now in Montemoro Novo, just about 70 kilometers from Lisbon. I'm one of the co-founders of the Impact Hub Lisbon. Many of you might know it. It's a network for social entrepreneurs worldwide, and we have our own chapter in Lisbon. And I'm as well living in Montemor because I'm starting here a Gandum village, a village related to sustainability and learning how to find solutions for climate change and other sustainability challenges. And I've worked many years with the food waste, reducing food waste, especially in restaurants, canteens, and we've accepted this challenge on how to think about food waste as the most important measure we can take to reduce our impact in the world. So me and Philippe have very similar life paths, and we just got to know each other now, but it sounds like our discussion now will be kind of a personal discussion that we can have sharing it with you. And Philippe, since you've been a consultant and now going into Too Good To Go, how do you see the development of this topic? Why is it so relevant?
Yeah, João, it's a very good point. I think it is now more relevant than ever before, particularly as we're seeing in the news, with the extreme weather events happening left and right across Europe and across the world. New reports coming out that we are already in the midst of the climate crisis, and the vast contributor of climate change is our food system. A lot of people still neglect it, and still people are unaware of the vast impact the food system has on our climate. Just to give you an idea, that food waste alone is responsible for up to 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And then also a huge impact on biodiversity loss, deforestation, etc. So ultimately, I think what is really happening right now is that people are starting to really see the impact firsthand in the news, but also right in front of their eyes, of what is happening within the climate crisis, and also what kind of solutions do exist. And ultimately, the food system is right within that. And this is really an exciting time to finally push on this topic and to really make people aware of that. Do you maybe want to explain, João, why it is such a big problem when it comes to the climate food waste?
Yeah, so I prepared here some slides. They're in Portuguese, but don't worry, Philippe, I'll explain it to you. It's not important, just the titles. Can you see my screen? Hope so. No.
Here we go. Yeah.
There we go. So actually, you were talking about 10%, but in a study found out that it's actually in Portugal about 31%, almost a third of our impact of our environmental impact is due to our food. 29% is due to our food system, followed by transportation. We always think about transportation as one of the most important because we see the gases coming out of our cars, but actually the whole food system involves also a lot of transportation and production of many inputs that we need in agriculture, the whole cold chains, the transportation, packaging, all that has a huge influence on our impacts, environmental impact. And to give us a perspective on this, very quickly, our world is mostly made of water, and only 29% is land, not submerged by water. And from that, only 71% is habitable. The rest are glaciers or deserts. And even within the habitable land, we have half of that we can use for agricultural production, meaning 10% of the whole world surface is able to be used as to produce food. The rest are forests or urban areas or even lakes. So we don't have much area to produce our food. And if we look at it, if we would look at the whole surface of the world, this would mean that we will have the Eurasian continent all producing food. And as we know, and as everyone knows already by now, this has been a topic that has been going for more than 10 years. 1/3 of the total food production is lost or wasted. And to give us a perspective, this is as having the whole Asian continent producing food that we are not eating. And this is why we can see the food waste problematic as so relevant as one of the main drivers reducing climate change. We have a big impact on the land surface, especially by producing food. And if 1/3 of that food is not being consumed by us, this means that we are using resources, especially land, soil, for nothing. And thus, if we can reduce food waste, we can also reduce production, or at least not having to increase production due to the growing population, and thus also reduce our environmental impact.
Yeah, and completely.
It's crazy,
It's absolutely crazy. But one report also suggested that if we would save 1/4, so 25% of all the food that is going to waste currently in the world, we would be able to feed everyone today and all those 800 million people who don't have enough to eat, plus all the 2 to 3 billion people we estimate will be on our planet by 2050. So just saving 1/4 of all the food we're wasting, we will not even be needing to produce more food, which is of course extremely encouraging because ultimately, like you said, we don't have enough space. And also we need the forests around us to be able to survive as a human being on our planet. So we cannot afford to cut down even more forests. So when we see now we have the overall problem, I think people can kind of picture that we are talking about an issue at massive scale here. But the encouraging part of it all is that it also there's a clear solution to all of this. There's different solution across the supply chain for different reasons. Food is wasted along the entire supply chain. So it's not just the governments who are responsible for it. It's not just farmers like you, for example, who have to do something about it. It really is everyone along the entire supply chain. And I think we have both worked across different parts of the supply chain. So it would be interesting maybe to just think about, what are our insights on this when it comes to it? Because for myself, João, I don't know from your experience on the farm, but when I did my research here in Denmark, when I came to potato farmers, the vast majority of food that is being wasted on the farm is simply because potatoes, for example, don't have the right size, the right shape, the right color, and then they're just degraded into a different class and are not even sold or left behind on the farm, just because we have these quality standards or specifications in place, often set by retail or even by governments, that don't allow these basically to move forward. And I find that absolutely staggering. And that sometimes amounts to 30 to 40% of a farmer's harvest never even making it to the market, just because it doesn't have the right size. Do you have any experience in that, or how do you see like the biggest challenges for farmers when it comes to food waste?
So it's true. It's a very complex problem, and surely there's no silver bullet solution for it all. So it has to be. We always have to look at from an integrated perspective. Norms are a problem. Having to produce the perfect apple, the perfect potato, but not only. It has also to do how to a farmer, and not only a farmer, also the food industry that is producing perishable products, products that have a short time span of life. How can we estimate how much food to produce at a certain point that the consumers want to consume at that same point, at that same time span that the product is able to be used? And this happens as well. For example, you're talking now about raining in Denmark. I remember I lived in Switzerland. I worked with this topic for many years in Switzerland, and I remember one big topic was the sausage production. So sausage you can really freeze. So usually people consume more sausages in summer because it's good weather. They grill outside, and a bad summer where there's less opportunities to grill outside, the sausages have been anyways produced because they have to be produced 6 months in advance, and so those sausages that are not being grilled in that summer, they'll eventually go to waste. And so it's really hard to think about this problematic as a simple one. We have to work together. Even farmers have to work with industry, have to work with the consumers, and here consumers, I think about restaurants and families, and also because coming into the last miles of the food supply chain, especially in developed countries like Portugal, Denmark, European countries, 50% of the food we're wasting, it's at restaurants and at the households, and it's there where we have a direct impact. So there, we cannot say it has been the government, we cannot say it has been the farmer. It's us who are buying too much, who are going to restaurants and have big portions, and we think that a bigger portion is a signal of indicates that it's a higher quality, and restaurants have to cope with that. And at the end, if food at this time it's not consumed, it's gonna go to waste. Not only the food that we're wasting, but all the resources that have gone into that food. For a French fry in a restaurant to be wasted, it's not the same as a potato in the farm, because it has been transported, it has been refrigerated, it has been fried with oil, high temperatures. It has a lot of more embodied energy. We called it virtual energy. And the impact of a French fry being wasted at the restaurant is much higher than a potato at the farm.
No, and completely. But what is extremely encouraging, though, for individuals is that we can actively do something about food waste straight away. It's something, a wind turbine, for example, you will not be able to put that into your garden the next day. Even an electric car, you might have to save up for it, etc. So, of course, we are looking left and right when it comes to solution against climate change. And what is extremely exciting with food waste is that from day one, we can just decide, let's stop wasting food. Let's eat our entire plate. Let's not misinterpret these kind of date labels. Like in Portugal, for example, we launched a very successful campaign that basically tried to make people understand the difference between a use-by date and a best-before date, which a lot of people don't know about. But ultimately, a best-before date, when it's on a yogurt, for example, or on cereals, on pasta, it doesn't mean that that product is no longer good to eat. It just purely shows that, yes, it could be eaten afterwards, and that we should use our senses of look, smell, and tasting it before actually wasting it. And I think these are the kind of notions that we, especially with Too Good To Go, try to give to the public as much as possible. It's all about education at the end of the day, I think, because we have pretty much lost the connection to food. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that definitely I'm seeing in our generations now, which maybe our grandparents and etc. maybe didn't have, but we don't really know where food is coming from anymore, how it is produced, all the people that are touching it, everything, that is inbuilt in this food. And because we no longer value food the same way and we don't know where it's coming from anyway, we are just more prone to waste it. And I think, so it's really about making people more conscious and motivated and more aware of what food is and its importance. And
Exactly.
I think that's just the key. Education is definitely the key.
And as well, because I'm an economist. I think you studied also management or economics, right, Philippe?
Yeah.
And we know that if the price would be higher for food, of course we would be wasting much less food. But as a government, we cannot just raise the taxes on food in order to waste less, because it would be very hard, especially for those who cannot afford food as much as the ones who can. So it has to do a lot with awareness. It has to do a lot with knowing that, not taking for granted the food at the supermarket. Someone has been working for it at the farm, at the logistics, at the transformation. And what it touches me the most is like when I go to a restaurant and a chef produces a wonderful menu, and then you can really eat it all, or you don't eat it all, and like even the love that someone put into a meal, and it goes to waste. It's even heartbreaking for the one who cooked for you. It's like if your mom cooked for you and then you say, I don't want to eat, and like it's kind of heartbreaking for the one who spent time doing it. And we cannot just look through the lenses of finances or money, but also the meaning of food. Food keeps us alive, and we have to eat 3 to 5 times a day, and wasting it's very even from an ethical perspective, very let's say uncool.
No, completely.
So we have
I think it's also the expectation that we have, that we always want to have full shelves, or that we always want to have abundance in a certain way, that we always need to have a full shelf of supermarkets, that we always need to have fresh baked goods, for example. And I think even when you speak about the financing part of it and the economics part of it, is that nowadays food services or food businesses such as bakeries, supermarkets, they are expected to always have more in store. And of course, that means that a lot of it is going to waste at the end of the day. It's very difficult to predict or to forecast how many people are actually going to turn up. And that's why pretty much that's how Too Good To Go started at the very first instance, because we know that you're never going to get it perfect. So ultimately, instead of wasting it, let's use that surplus and reduce the price of it and give it to somebody who did not expect it at first. And I think that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be rocket science at times, solutions. We can very adopt it at a scale that is just possible, and just thinking about connecting the dots between business and the consumers as well. And I think each individual, a business, can all do something about it. I think we just got a question in actually, which is really interesting when it comes to the challenges that we are seeing, for the future when it comes to food waste. I definitely see a few. What do you think, João?
So the question goes, what are the main challenges within this topic that future generations will face? And this, I would say, we will face food shortages. I think that in the near future, we are now dealing actually with a luxury problem, because some years ago, not many years ago, maybe 70, 80 years ago, we didn't have enough food to feed the population, even in Europe. Of course, some areas of the globe, we still see that problem, but not that many years ago, we had that in Europe. And now we came into an era of overconsumption, of having more than what you need, but with the world resources being more and more scarce. And one of the biggest problems is topsoil desertification. So meaning maybe we have land, but that land is not fertile, so we will not be able to produce as much food as we're producing nowadays. And probably in the future, this problem we are facing now, if we don't do anything, we will start having food shortages. Not that we'll go hungry, but maybe we will not have this diversity that we have nowadays. And maybe in the future, food waste will not be a problem, not because we solved it, but because we didn't solve it and it became a bigger problem. I don't know if you agree with me, Philippe, on this one.
I completely agree with you. I think what is also interesting with the food system, that the food system is kind of a contributor to climate change and a key way of why we're in the middle of the climate crisis. But ultimately, as we're going more and more into this climate crisis, the weather systems will change, etc., and that will have a massive impact on the food system as well. So it's pretty much this vicious circle. The worse we make it, the worse it's also going to hit the food system and the whole economics of it and the security of it, the yields. We're seeing that with droughts and flooding everywhere. So of course that will have a massive impact on food prices and food shortages as well. I think the second question that just came in as well is, speaking to government entities, us, for example, it basically asked, what kind of support would you expect from government entities? I think for me, looking also the work that we're doing with Too Good To Go, so we are a private sector company. I think what we would really expect or really encourage governments to do is to work hand in hand with the private sector and to not isolate them from the conversation. I think it's really important to fight food waste together, to really build a movement, that enjoys collaboration. Ultimately, we as Too Good To Go, for example, we are a solution. We bring something concrete to the table, and we are able to actually solve one of the concrete problems that cities are facing nowadays, which is, of course, this food surplus. So it's about bringing all the dots, bringing all these solution providers on the table and kind of creating this frame that allows these kind of solutions to flourish within cities. I think this is definitely a key aspect because at the end of the day, the most amount of food that is being wasted in Europe, just like you mentioned it, is within our urban areas. It is within our households, within our restaurants, within our supermarkets. And ultimately, this is also, therefore, a responsibility for governments to take this on as well, particularly on a local level, to really tackle it going forward.
Totally
what would you
agree.
think? Well,
I agree, and it's of course we can regulate, but sometimes the regulations are made in a way that are just one-sided, and in order for regulations to work, government should be at least in discussion or in an open discussion with the private sector, with NGOs, to understand if, yes, we can regulate some things, but sometimes the regulation is even worse. Because companies, this is usually not like the main driver for a company to exist, to reduce food waste. Usually I have to pay my bills and my salaries. And so at the end, if let's talk about restaurants, supermarkets, if they're obliged not to waste, this should not be an obligation, should be a cooperation. As Too Good To Go does, it creates a financial incentive so that they have a financial incentive not to waste in a way. But I totally agree that cooperation is the way forward, not only in food waste, but also in many other environmental and social topics. And so, yeah, I fully agree. I don't know if I have still time for a third question here, if the host is saying yes. So how can we tackle the environmental struggles if we can't even overcome hunger? I don't see this as a yes or no. I don't see it as we first tackle environmental problems and then have to solve world hunger. I see this as going hand in hand. We can solve hunger by being better to our environment. Meaning, instead of, for example, producing, I don't want to open the Pandora box, but I'll talk about this quickly. It's if we talk about the common agricultural policy in Europe that incentivizes farmers to produce a lot of something that maybe it's not enough, it's not needed. It decreases the prices of food, and this decreases the incentive for developing countries to produce the same food, and this creates like a vicious circle that people. It's easier, it's cheaper to import food from Europe than to produce food themselves. And maybe if we review this macro scale food system connections, and if we enable people in countries where there's still hunger to produce foods in environmental sound ways, in good ways to produce food, we are solving at the one point the environmental impact of food, and hunger. Hunger, it's mostly related to people not being able to afford food. They don't have enough money to buy food. It's not really about having enough food in the food system or not. It's a problem of having let's say some people have too much and others have too little. It's a problem with distribution. That's the word I was looking for. Do you agree with me, Philippe?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have much to add. I completely agree with you when it comes to the hunger part. I think also, for me, the biggest opportunity we have in front of our eyes is really that we are able to build this sustainable circular food system that is also regenerative and in connection with nature. And ultimately, I don't think we should isolate the social part, maybe the food insecurity or the hunger part, from the environmental, because ultimately the environmental has to work hand in hand with the social part. So just to give you one example, if we continue with the climate crisis, there will be a huge amount of migration from the east, for example, going to Europe, a massive amount of refugees left and right, health crisis at the same time. So of course, that an environmental crisis will turn out to be a social crisis as well. So we should not see them in isolation, but ultimately build a system that works for society, that is able to make the most out of the produce that we have, but also make sure that it actually fits into the nature part of it as well, that we work together with nature and not against it. And I think that is definitely the biggest opportunity we have here. And I think food waste really well fits into this, because ultimately it creates this massive amount of greenhouse gas emissions. It is a massive factor when it comes to natural degradation, but it is also an important factor to keep in mind to build this system that we want to see. Without reducing food waste, we will never be able to achieve a sustainable food system for the future, and which we need in order to combat climate change. So we cannot take food waste out of the equation, and it is simply crucial when it comes to fighting climate change going forward.
And the final note here is, how can a person, a consumer, in an everyday basis relate to these huge topics that we are now talking, like to the world hunger and climate change? And there's a really big connection, as in everything that we're talking about when we talk about climate change. It comes up to each one of us to do its part. And of course, not everyone in the world will be doing their part, but if we're the majority of us reducing waste, eating less meat, driving less planes, if it's the majority of us, we will have an impact. We don't have to wait for the most skeptical ones or the critical ones to also be convinced in order for everyone to act. If we are already aware of this problem, we should start acting, even if not everyone around of us is acting, because we don't have time to lose. I think this is the biggest message that we got from this last IPCC climate report, is we don't have time to lose. So if we don't have time to lose, even if there are some critics or more skeptical people, we still have to act. We still have to reduce food waste in our homes, in our restaurants. We influence governments to do their part as well, by voting, by being more proactive in political terms. And only if we really do act, we will be able to live a better world, or at least as good as a world as we have now, to our upcoming generations.
I think that's a beautiful conclusion. All I can say is that every little counts, 100%. We should not lay back and think about governments taking the lead on this. It is really down to individual action, which will push this through. And ultimately, that's extremely empowering to be able to do that, and that we can all drive a change and we can all make a difference. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and ultimately that you will all become waste warriors and really see food waste as a massive opportunity, challenge, but also as a way to combat climate change in the future. So thank you very much, João, of course, and also to the organizers. Thank you very much for inviting the two of us. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the event.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.